Guardians still haven't played a game yet, but we're going to talk more draft because of it. And I'm going to explain the biggest question that I saw online, which is why are people not watching the All-Star game on today's episode of Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Guardians. I'm your host, Jeff Ellis, as I have been for all of these episodes of this entire podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever it is you get podcasts. And I also want to take a moment and explain who I am, which is before this gig, I was a lead draft and prospect analyst for Scouting 24/7. Before that, I wrote for every Cleveland sports blog you've probably ever read, specifically mostly about the draft and prospects. So let's start off with the All-Star Game. I read a lot of things today about why is the All-Star Game ratings hitting an all-time low? Why is the All-Star Game something people aren't watching? Well, I mean, I didn't watch it. I had people ask me questions. I'm like, I got other things to do. At the same time, it was still the highest rating sporting event since Game 6 of the NBA Finals. So it's all relative. And when they're like, well, back in the 90s, when it had a 20 share, whatever it was like that. Okay, so I was a kid in the 90s. And I'll explain to you why it is different now, why people watch it so much then and not now. One, as a kid in the 90s, if Tony Gwynn was, one of those guys we thought could hit 400, Andres Galarraga had some great starts to years. There was always, Johan Santana he was with the Twins then, eventually ended up with the Mets. But if you're on the other side of things, like he was the best pitcher on the planet by a large margin. I'm just trying to think about who the stars were. But the whole point being here is you didn't see them. There was no MLB TV. This was like the one time a year I was going to get to see those players live. If you were a National League player, you didn't come to the American League, so I didn't see you. There was no interleague. There was no streaming service. So it made that game important because that was the one time to see all of those players. So if you really loved baseball, it stood out for that reason. So that's part one. Part two, there's so many different things you can watch nowadays, and I find it hard, honestly, to watch TV. I have a hard time sitting there and watching something that has commercial breaks anymore because I spend so much of my life watching things that don't. And a lot of people don't want to watch live TV anymore. It's just the truth of it. They'll watch their sporting event, but an All-Star game, which is essentially an exhibition game, it's hard. And again, there's so many different places. I mean, when I was a kid, back in my day situation, we only had basic cable. I had 13 channels, so I watched all sporting events just because I was thankful for it. Nowadays, if you got the internet, which most homes do in America, not all, but a majority do, you can watch anything at any time just through YouTube virtually, and that's free, let alone all the services. And then 3, baseball hasn't evolved the All-Star Game. Its biggest evolution was it matters now. The whole thing about whoever wins the World Series gets home field advantage, which was dumb. But it's also a situation where, look at, the NHL was actually pretty good about being on the cutting edge with this. They were the first ones that did a draft, right? Excuse me. Now the NBA does that too, where you draft teams and you got some fake tension between them and some feeling of caring. Make it something where it's like that. Eliminate the whole coach aspect. No one cares about the coaches at the All-Star Game. Let, the AL MVP from last year and the NL MVP from last year draft from a pool, and then the winning team gets money because that'll make them care to some degree. Right? That's how they should go. Make it something like we've seen with the NHL and the NBA, because nobody cares about the Pro Bowl. Sorry, football. Yours is definitely the least interesting. But do something. You got to do something to change it. Make more interesting. There's been no evolution. It's the same home run derby, and then, AL versus NL that it's been since the last time it evolved is when they got rid of the end of the year All-Star Game. There used to be multiple All-Star events. This is the change of it is now there is not multiple All-Star events. There is one, but nothing else has changed. Home run derby, doesn't feel like a lot of people were really all that juiced for. My idea was, let's put the 10 worst home run hitters and see who can hit the most. Or, I don't know, a velocity contest. Like, just let some guys go out and throw 10 pitches or movement or things like that. If you're like, oh, I don't want someone to blow their arm out. It's only 10 pitches. I mean, they're trying to do that in most games anyways, is just go out there and let it rip. But do something interesting. Do a sprint. Let's see who let's sit there and find out who the fastest guy in baseball. Let's find out who's the hardest throwing guy in baseball. Let's find out who's got the greatest curve. Do something like that. Something interesting but different and new. I think the big problem with the All-Star game is it hasn't evolved at all in any form. And we see other leagues have done some attempt to do that. Who do I blame? Well, I always stick with Rob Manfred, who also made that great comment about minor leaguers making a living wage, and then a bunch of minor leaguers proceeded to be like, I made $11,000 last year. And I know Manfred would argue, well, it's only like 4 months of work. That's a third of the year. That puts you on pace for $33,000 if you worked a full year. It's like, yeah, but then as a baseball player, you go work at whatever job is going to give you the leeway to disappear for a few months. It's not a lot of them. So it's, he's definitely awful, and it is a problem. I don't think anyone's going to do anything to evolve the game. I think it's in a good enough state for them, but they could make it fun. They could make it interesting. Like, before the NBA drafted stuff, did their draft and all that stuff, I liked watching it as a kid for the 3-point contest and the slam dunk, but that stuff started to get old. Remember? Then they introduced skills contests. They did other things. Adding the draft, I think, really helped make it a more interesting component, the back and forth on how that works. There's ways to spice it up and evolve. And when it comes to sports, you got to do that. You got to spice it up and evolve. You can't keep things the same. So that's kind of my take on the All-Star game. I have people ask me about, various player performances, and I couldn't tell you. Yeah, I know Clase pitched, and Jose wasn't a starter, so I can't even tell you if Jose or Andres played in the game. I wasn't paying any attention. I'm sorry, I'm part of the problem. I never missed it until I was about a college-age kid, and then I had other things once I got to college that I was more concerned about during the summers, and I never went back. So it was also one of those things that was like interesting as a kid. But then again, as I grew up, I had more things to focus on. And then it became a thing where it's like, it doesn't matter if I don't see, Clayton Kershaw pitch here because I have MLB TV. I can see every single one of his starts if I want. It's not that limited feeling. It's not that this is my one time a year. And I don't know, it doesn't have... Let me know if I'm wrong, if you feel different. Hit me up on my Twitter at JeffMLBDraft. But the All-Star game just feels boring. I like baseball. Having them wear dull uniforms that are uniform. I don't know what they're doing with it. New skills competitions. Figure something different. Add a draft component. You can't have like a little playoff with like almost be more interesting to have like, I don't know how you would do it, but like everyone, makes fun of how bad the AL Central is, but like if you had each division had an all-star team and then they played off over the course of a week, of course the problem would be the pitching with that, so it doesn't really work. But yeah, I don't know. Do that, but instead of pitchers, it's just a pitching machine. It's just a coach or something, so no one has to worry about their arm. I don't know. But the long story short, at this point in time, it's not a must-see event. It's not an interesting event. And it's an event that feels, it feels stale. It feels old, and that's not going to help you get young eyes on it. So All-Star game needs to evolve. We're going to take a break, come back, get into a little more in depth the day 3 players of the draft, as we haven't had a chance to give them their due yet on today's Locked On Guardians. So the Sports Card Investor app is a really cool idea. I like it. I've used it in application. I've told you about it. I've got the cards right over there. It's nice because instead of like, so in fairness, it's not like taking that time to go through the old Beckett magazine, but I kind of loved that back in the day. Getting my monthly baseball Beckett. My cousin got the NFL one, then we trade halfway through the month. But do you remember that fun feel with Beckett magazine and looking up your cards and seeing you can do that now You don't have to wait for that once a month. You just pick up your phone, scan your cards. And it's not just baseball. It's not just sports. I mean, they have Marvel cards and various other type, and they're adding more and more all the time. So go check that out. Get that feeling like when you were a kid, some of that nostalgia of checking your cards. But again, it's not Beckett Magazine. You don't have to wait for it to come. You can check every single day, and they're using cross-referencing through things like eBay, and they'll even help you sell your cards if you decide it's time to move on. Your collection's just collecting dust, and you want to make a few bucks. Right now, go to the Sports Card Investor app and download it through either iTunes or Google Play, free in both, or head to sportscardinvestor.com/lockedon. It's a fun app. I've used it. Try it out. I can't recommend it enough. It's so easy to find out how much your cards are worth. I think I've done too many podcasts. I'm going to apologize now. I feel like my voice is starting to go on me a little, so I'm just going to put that out there. I feel like, yesterday I was talking with Lindsay, and he's like, how are you holding up? You did like more than anyone just because I did all those streams on draft night. Like, I'm doing fine, but man, today it's starting to slip on me a bit here. So day 3 of the draft. The Guardians, as we talked about, I don't know if anyone saw Keith Law. Oh, man. I mean, his review today was just brutal. It was like, what was his exact statement? The Cleveland Guardians draft is a draft if you followed a model and didn't actually watch any of these players. It was like, dang. Because, he contends like Jordan Humphreys is like, I can't remember the wording, but he makes him sound really bad. Like, he makes him sound like just a wasted draft pick. He makes Zibin sound like he's going to be just like he's just a, like, basically it's like if you just look at 17-year-olds and this and that. Like, I mean, I've always appreciated Keith because he does things like that. He just kind of, he speaks his mind, and he's not, he's not going to just fall in. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. We do think that Zibin's going to sign for about $1.2 million as they're reported. I originally heard something a lot more than that he was going to cost something like $2 million. So that's interesting that he's going to sign for that. But $1.2 million, by the way, with his draft pick, that's a 1.51. I almost wonder if it's like 1.1, like if he got $1 million overslot or if he got like $1 million for it. But either way, they have to make $1 million. So, okay, the draft pool rules. In the past, this team has typically gone right up to the maximum, which is essentially 5% minus $1. Because you can go 5% over your pool minus $1. If you get to 5% over, well, then you lose next year's draft pick. So that's why they stopped there. So they would go up to that minus $1 and just maximize their spending. Last year, they're actually left about $5,000 on the table, a very small amount. And the year before that, they left money on the table. So we have to see what's going to happen this year. I don't know, because here's the thing: when you go over that 5%, each $1 passed is taxed. Essentially, if you spend that extra 5%, here. I'm going to pause and pull up my spreadsheet from last year to give you an exact example of how this would work. So you won't be able to see this as well if you're listening, of course, because you can't see. But on the YouTube, you can see I make this every year, and I kind of go through and just update it. It's nice and easy because I made a spreadsheet. And you can see right down here, it's like they could go over $369,940. Now, when you can go over by that much, if they go over by that much, every single dollar they spend is double. So if they can go over by essentially $370,000 there, to spend $370,000 more costs them actually $760,000 more. As you can see last year, that was what was left, is the $4,500. This next to it, you can see, is my terrible redraft from last year. So don't look at that. I made some terrible mistakes just because I was sticking with my board and because Gavin Williams was very good. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I really need to go back and audit myself, if I'm being perfectly honest. But this is what it kind of looks like. You can see that my one rule when I do this shadow draft is that I have to spend the same amount. So I couldn't go over what was here. So I was just kind of looking at ways to make this work and make it function. But yeah, so the Guardians typically can go over by this much. And like I said, from the implementation of the slotting system in 2012 until 2019, they went over every year, often right up to it. then since 2020, they have not. They've actually left minimal. I mean, $5,400 is not minimal to you and me, but in the terms we're talking about, like $7 million spent, it's minimal. So they're not like, it's not a cheap thing, but it's a little bit of a cheap thing, because you can't tell me that having an extra, $370,000 to spend last year wouldn't have allowed them to net one more high value player. So just something to keep in mind, something to kind of explain out here as we talk about some of the players. But Zibin's $1 million, I'm almost guaranteeing that all of that is going to come from Talalock. I don't think he gets, $3 million. I think he's a guy who's rumored to maybe go, like, I liked him. I was high on him, but he was rumored in the Guardians range, but a lot of people thought he'd go in the 20s. So, he might be like 2.5, which would save the Guardians like 1.4. And then that means $1 million to Zibin, and then $400,000 more to Humphreys. And then again, Campbell's probably full freight. Mezek, I think, might be under. Lampe should be under. Furman should be under. Limscomb should be under. DeLuca should be. I mean, that's the thing. Most of these picks strike me as guys who should be under. Javier Santos should be over. Humphrey should be over. Zibin should be over. Peterson, I think, is full freight where he is, just because he's a 9th rounder. So, yeah, I mean, they had a lot of kind of under dealings, so we're assuming that money's going to come back in. And I thought they might have more for a little bit for day 3, but it didn't appear like they did. So let's just talk about the 11th round is a very important round. Teams are targeting players in that round. I would argue it's a more productive round than the 10th or 9th round, which are often just senior sign baloozas. Is that what I want is a word? But you get my point. You see a lot of senior signs. So what happens in the 11th is you take a guy, you're feeling pretty good, you're going to sign him. You've probably already got a deal in place, if we're being honest. But it is often a place where you're giving a little bit extra money. That might be where you're going above slot to get a guy right there. Rather infamously for the Guardians, the Clint Frazier draft, where they gave up 2 draft picks to sign Bourne and Swisher, so they didn't have a ton of picks. And I think their first, after when they were back, I think it was the 3rd round, because it's like they gave up a competitive balance pick and they gave up their second. They went out and added, Dice Kime, Defiance kid who went to, was he a Vandy Arm? I don't think he was a Vandy Arm. I can't remember where he was from. But the rest of those, and then after that, it was all these underslot guys. And then day 3 starts, and they took Adam Plutko, and a lot of people are like, he's going back to school. Like, he had a disappointing junior year. But no, it turned out all of their savings went to Plutko in the 11th. And no matter how you feel about Plutko's performance, I mean, he hit the big leagues for an 11th rounder. That's solid. That is a solid pick right there. But let's talk about the 11th rounder this time. Magnus Ellerts. They did not take a pitcher from the University of Florida, but Ellerts was supposed to go to Florida, so they kind of did it this year. 6'5", 225, and his name is Magnus. He's pitching in the Cape currently. I had his Cape stats. I'm trying to remember which screen those are up on. Currently pitching in the Cape for Chatham, and he's pitched well in the Cape. I thought I had it over here, but I think I clicked on something else, and I decided to open the wrong tab and opened over it. He's pitched well. He's had some saves. He's not actually starting at all in the Cape. He's worked mostly out of relief, but he was a starter, and he was dominant at the JUCO level. He was a JUCO pitcher. He's, top categories across the board in a lot of things. Solid pitcher. He's going to go to Cleveland. He's not going to go to the University of Florida. There's a lot of effort, and I mean, he looks like a reliever, and a big, strong reliever. And as a small school guy who's bounced around a bit, well, he hasn't bounced around a bit. He's just been at Florida Southwestern State College. You're hoping there's a little more growth potential, that he can maybe end up getting into something, instead of sitting low 90s, be mid 90s, and this working with the slider could lead to being a solid relief type. Jack Jasiack, University of South Florida. Shane McClanahan went there. They had 3 pitchers drafted this past weekend. He was starting out really well for them. Let's see. I was going to see if there's anything about... going back to Magnus real quick. Strikeout per 9 over 13. Walk per 9 of 4.7, which is kind of high, especially at the level he pitched at. So goes a little bit against type. It is funny over on Baseball Cube. There's like no data, no born, no place, no high school, no nothing. But Jasiack, you have all of that, and he was born in Illinois, went to college in Florida, and stayed there. And he was out on the Cape last year, just 18 innings for him on the Cape, 4 starts, but he performed decently well. I only say decently well because he didn't actually miss a lot of bats, but he didn't get hit and he didn't walk anyone, so that's good. He performed. The ERA was 2.89. He just didn't miss all that many bats. He's a starter all throughout his college career, and unfortunately for him this year was just the 5 starts because then the undisclosed medical injury in March. And I was going to say, in their press release, did they say exactly what occurred shut down in late March due to injury. I mean, I'm thinking he's going to have major surgery, and he was just waiting because after he gets drafted, he doesn't have to. That's on the team and not on him. He's an undersized right-hander, doesn't throw really hard. It's a hard profile to typically find success, but the Guardians like something there. And hey, another Cape performer. Stop me if you've heard that before. We're going to take a break here, come back, and continue to talk about the draft picks, getting into some more interesting players that stand out in this year's 2022 draft class. And our second fantastic sponsor is the one closest to my stomach. That would be BuiltBar.com. I love Built Bar. I have expressed my Built Bar love throughout this. Many years they've been a sponsor on the show. And why do I love them? Well, they make a large variety of fantastic tasting gluten-free products. I've talked about next week. We're going to go quiet here on the podcast because I'm going to go back to Ohio, see family and all of that stuff. And the video component being such a big component anymore, it's hard to take it on the road. But I'm going to be taking the Built Bars on the road, and you should too. I'm still tempted. Toffee Almond in their original one was my favorite. The original Toffee Almond to me was the best flavor they had in the original set. This is like Generation 2, and these are great, as well. I like the original Toffee Almond a little bit more than their remake one. But even if it's not for you, there are so many great flavors at BuiltBar.com. They do coconut very well. My wife, the s'mores wasn't gluten-free. There was the coconut brownie chunks given to my wife. She ate them already. Those are gone. I'm a big fan of the churro. I've done that one in the past. And anything coconut is great at BuiltBar.com. When you go to BuiltBar.com, remember to use the promo code LOCKED15. That saves you 15%. It's the code that I use. Go to BuiltBar.com today. It's the best tasting protein bar you will find, bar none. Yes, that pun was intended. Okay, let's keep going with the draft. Yes, I know some people are probably drafted out. I get it. We're just kind of knocking these out here over this week because there's not games to talk about. I didn't watch the All-Star game. So my favorite, again, we already did that, right? I tried to shake it up for some of you who get worn out on the draft. I know that occurs. For those who do, that's why I tried to have some fun at the front of the show. But Tyresse Turner in the 13th round is my favorite day 3 pick. All Pac-12 defense, and when you go and, it wasn't a big draft name necessarily this year, but if you go and look at his high school draft profile over at Perfect Game, it's interesting because he was originally committed to Oregon, ended up going to USC. But if you're looking at like his 60-yard dash, 6.44, that's 98th percentile for his class. His infield arm, 91 miles an hour, 96th for the class. His 10-yard split was actually not that high, but his exit velocity top result was 89. That's 78th percentile for his class. And again, he's a 5'10" guy, not really known for power. In college, he hit a grand total of 9 home runs. Now, again, it's essentially a 2-year deal because he's one of those guys whose first year was 2020. But over the last 2 years, he got in 40 games as a redshirt freshman. He got in 51 this year. You're looking at a guy who this year was 333, 419, 520. And the BABIP data on him is solid across the board. Low strikeouts, low walks, high contact, good defense, good speed. Sounds like a lot of guys in this draft class. Why do I like him a little bit more than some of the players that were mentioned from the day 2 part? He just did it at a higher level. He did it in a higher conference. That stands out to me. So yeah, I like him. I like the profile. I think it's a good utility profile. Maybe there's more Maybe there's not, but amongst the players on day 3, Tyresse Turner definitely stood out for me in particular in this class. Next up was Cavenaugh from UNC Greensboro, another guy who performed very well at his level. This past year, a 340 average, 403 on base, 507 slugging, had 13 doubles, 4 triples, 8 home runs, did a little bit of everything. Strikeout percentage of 9, walk percentage of 7. Looking at probably a backup type if everything works perfectly. Played, I think, all 3 spots, left-handed bat. Right there with Cavenaugh. There's not a whole ton. He's 6 feet tall. He fits the profile. Double-digit stolen bases. Again, this is the type, right? Contact, low strikeouts, speed. This was the Guardians type in this draft. Next up, Adam Talalock, who started out at West Virginia, then went to College of Central Florida, then Wingate, and then ended this past year at Arizona State University. His college career started back in 2019, so technically he would have had another year of eligibility left because everyone had that lost year in 2020. That was his Central Florida year where he didn't really pitch. Was at West Virginia last year before moving on to Arizona. Good velocity for a lefty. Missed a ton of bats. His strikeouts per 9 throughout his career was always double digits. This last year was actually the lowest at 11.36. Walk rates were pretty bad, almost 6 for his college career. So he is a lefty who misses bats with command issues, not their normal type. So when they take someone who isn't their normal type, that stands out to me. I think at the end of the day, if you're the Guardians, you're like, he can already miss bats. Yeah, he needs to work on his command and his control. It kind of reminds me, Blanket, they took a picture many, many years ago from UC Irvine, that many of us really liked, and I'm blanking on his name right now. And one of the things about that guy was he had gone through 4 different programs in his 4 years of college, and he was awesome in low A and high A, and many of us were talking about putting him in the top 10. Got to double A, and it didn't go well. Hopefully that doesn't happen here, but you're betting on the consistency of coaching, that he has bounced around so much that he has not had any type of consistency. So you're like, okay, he's missed bats. He's an upside gamble. You can never have enough left-handed pitching. And as an organization, they kind of needed a little bit more left-handed pitching in general. So get why they did that. After him, Logan Clark, who I think is going to be a bit of a... Sorry, I just got thrown off because I saw an article about Logun Clark, and then it's a Jasiack Ellis in it, which is my sister's name. I was just over here. What's going on? Why is that popping up there? But I think he's going to be someone that fans like, because at the end of the day, he is right-handed. He is a catcher. He's a stocky build guy, and people always love those stocky build guys. And yeah, he's got power. So I think he is going to be a guy that stands out, pulling up his perfect game data over here. He's another one, though, and again, going against type. We talked about that with Tulloch. We talked about it with Javier. He's 19 already. He's 19 and a month old. He is an older high school guy. When you're going through and looking at his data, what's interesting is, his 60-yard dash, 10th percentile. His 10-yard split, 4th percentile. He's not booking it. His catcher arm, 58th percentile, so not the strongest throw back there, but his pop time was 84th percentile. Exit velocity, 88.5. So he's getting the ball out hard and quick. He hits the ball hard. He has good pop times. Arm, not as great. So you're like, okay, just get him stronger, right? And then here's my favorite one. Shows good flexibility behind the plate with solid comprehension for his framing mechanics. It's like, okay, and there we know why he was a target for the Guardians. He can frame, is what Perfect Game is saying. But on top of just the data they had, it's like he's a 14th rounder, 15th rounder, 16th rounder. Wow, we did a whole 6 today. We only got 4 guys left to talk about. But he's a 16th rounder. Why not gamble on a guy who can frame and potentially hit for above average power? We'll see. The Guardians have struggled. I mean, high school catchers are riskier than high school pitchers, so who knows? They've spent a lot, the Lucas Simeons, the Alex Leveskis, and there's the college guys. Gavin Collins is still in the system, but Michael Tinsley, and I'm trying to remember. So, they used to draft 2 catchers a year, and I thought for sure they'd add more catchers. This is the only catcher they drafted. This was the best college catcher crop in a very long time, and they just ignored it. So we'll see. But yeah, Logan Clark, Logun, I think is going to be someone that fans get interested in and intrigued by, especially if he comes out and starts hitting the ball hard. Just because that's a right-handed bat who's a catcher with power potential it feels like what everyone is all the time asking for when it comes to the Cleveland Guardians. I want to thank you for listening, rating and reviewing, all of that. I know I need to go in and thank some more people. I saw there were some iTunes reviews. I appreciate all the kindness. Like I said, this time of year, I got a lot going on with the draft and everything else, so I appreciate everyone kind of letting me have my flight of fancy and really focus in. We will talk about the last 4 players tomorrow, and we'll also kind of preview how the schedule is shaping up. People ask me about a Soto deal, and here's my response on why it's silly to talk about it. The Guardians would never do it. It's antithetical to everything they do. We're probably, like I said, we're going to do a preview tomorrow. We're going to get these last 4 players out. And then I've been debating, if I want to do a top 15 prospects, if we want to re-rack things a little bit in that regard, or if we just want to, start getting ready for the trade deadline on August 2nd. Either way, tomorrow's show, I guarantee, is going to be a lot of fun. I'm Jeff Ellis. This is the Locked On Guardians podcast. Remember, rate and review, download daily. It helps. And as I end every show, and subscribe on YouTube. It also helps. And as I end every show, go Guardians, go.